which MLB organization has the most interesting pitching philosophies. In this video, what we're going to do is combine the minor league data from A-ball all the way up to AAA into one individual number and analyze how different organizations approach velocity, usage, etc. based on pitch type, their overall performance. This is very similar to a video I did last season on the exact same topic. This year, however, because we have that old data, we can compare and see how teams have grown and point out a couple teams that I think are really interesting risers to keep an eye on. One of my favorite videos to do, it's more screen share style, so it's a lot of me talking over what we're going to look at from the data side in my running notes sheet. But this is going to be fun. Let's get going. All right, right side of your screen is my running notes, which I've already put together after looking through the information, which is on our left side. Left side here, I've highlighted with a specific color the teams that we're going to hit on. So if you're looking for an individual team that we're going to hit on in this video, I would try to follow that color as I jump through things. The information over here is on the org level, so it doesn't change based on the pitch type, which is column G right here, which I'll eventually sort through. There's going to be a lot of focus on fastballs and sliders because I think that gets at the majority of usage in organizations. Then as you get into individual pitch stuff over here, I will be sorting through it. We're also going to get to some change tabs, which are over here, which I mentioned, right? The differences between 2023 and 2024. The three pillars I used when digging through this information, I would say, are velocity, usage, and zone rate, or strikes. Velo being super predictive of success, and I also think indicative of organizations that value velocity, value analytics generally. I think that's a pretty good way to point out which teams are more analytically driven. Usage is a really good one because I think it gets at higher level strategy from a strategy standpoint, as opposed to application of biomechanics and data. It's more, what are we doing actually in games to get hitters out? And how does maybe that bubble up to the major leagues? Zone rate is another one that's a bit more ambiguous. I'll hit on it a bit, but I think this is maybe the one that's harder to figure out because a lot of the times I think it maybe just ties back to catching philosophy in the minors. We're going to see an individual team there that really jumps out on it. But let's get going. I'm going to try to pace this up and go somewhat quick, but I will be in the comments after this to answer any questions. Let's start with the Dodgers, who are the kings of pitching development generally, and it goes for the minor leagues as well. They hold the highest fastball velocity, which you can see right here in column J, 94 miles per hour, the only team above 94 miles per hour. Perhaps the more interesting thing, though, I think of them, and I've done other videos on this, I think of them as an interesting slider organization. They prioritize good fastballs, but also really like sliders. What we're starting to see with them is that they're throwing really hard sliders alongside the Rays, who are our second team here, which I'll get to in a sec. The Dodgers throw really hard sliders, and they use the pitch a pretty good amount. 29% is pretty high usage. It's not as high as I think some other teams, but it's fourth highest, right? Again, and not surprising, the four teams we're going to talk about in this video all throw a lot of sliders. But besides the point, the Dodgers are really good. They also are really good from the standpoint of generating swing and miss on their sliders. Again, watch this lighter blue here as I sort and go swing miss. We're looking at the number one org in baseball in terms of generating slider swing miss. I think that maybe connects to what they do with their fastballs overall. The one knock I might have on the Dodgers this year, which I think deviates from prior years, is that they have a pretty high walk rate overall. Second highest walk rate here in the minors. They're striking out enough guys where it doesn't matter from a KO minus walk standpoint. It's more average. But this goes for their zone rate as well. They're getting okay chase on their sliders, but they're not throwing them in zone a lot. I wouldn't say they have zone problems. I just wonder whether it's a philosophy of theirs in the minors to push good shapes, good stuff, and then maybe help the guys find the zone later on. That I would bet that's what it is, because I still believe they are the kings of this stuff. They're prioritizing velocity smartly, generating a ton of swing miss on their sliders. They're just maybe not totally in zone a ton on a couple of their pitches. Something to watch going forward with them, but I would more so see if it causes concern at the major league level, which I doubt it will, than panic over what's happening on the minor league side. We're going to give them some benefit of the doubt. The Rays, number two, are slider factory. Really strong from a K minus walk perspective. Fourth highest. Again, this is org level. This isn't going to change whenever I change the pitch type right here. But the thing with the Rays that lines up to some extent with the Dodgers, they have the highest slider velocity in the minor leagues overall, right? Slider factory here. Highest slider velo. Second highest slider chase, which I think is, again, a really good statistic just to isolate off who is really good at game planning on an individual basis, using fastballs, perhaps maybe zoning pitches properly to generate that chase, sequencing well, thinking about sequencing in a modern way. The first change we'll look at, too, year over year, the Rays are throwing the sliders harder than they did in the past. This is going to be our slider changes, right? Velocity 2023, velocity 2024. Here's our delta. Look at that. 1.7 miles per hour harder. Next to the Angels, which is very confusing. We'll hit on them at the end. And the White Sox, who are an interesting team, we'll also hit on. But the Rays are 1.7 miles per hour harder on their sliders. That's interesting. I'm not entirely sure what to make of it. I think it's good, especially because it doesn't seem to me like their shape has changed a ton. I would argue that, when there's this philosophy that if you get an 85 mile per hour slider or better, it's a good pitch regardless of shape. And we got two teams right here, three teams with the White Sox. Surprising, right? You didn't expect to see the White Sox in with the Dodgers and the Rays, but we are at that point. We'll get to that in a sec. If they get above 85 miles per hour slider, what we're essentially saying is the average slider in their organization is good, which is really strong, especially when there's only two teams above 84 miles per hour on that velocity. It's not surprising that's the Rays and the Dodgers. Zoning everything is another key thing I really want to point out with them. Unlike the Dodgers, I wouldn't say, this is maybe the distinction between those two organizations. The Rays have nice zone rates on their sliders, so they're generating good swing miss, they're throwing them really hard, and they're zoning them at a top 5 rate. A lot of the other teams that zone their sliders don't generate the same amount of swing and miss, right? This team, I don't know what this team is. Who's this? This is Cleveland. Guardians. That's not surprising. The Guardians are also one of the teams above 33%. That's average slider swing miss at the major league level is 33%. So these teams are zoning their sliders at above average rate, getting swing miss at an above average rate, and generally that's just going to lead to good philosophies overall. Also, third highest fastball zone rate for them. Their four seam is the second highest induced vertical break, fourth highest chase. They're basing all this stuff off the slider. It's working for them. They don't throw a lot of sliders either, which maybe gets at an interesting point as to whether, where are they in terms? They're more average in slider usage. I won't say they're below average, but I'm surprised they're not using them more. Maybe that's something where they prioritize some fastball shape stuff, get guys in zone, and then as the guys increase through the minors, they use sliders more. I will also point out that the slider factory point for them relates to the major leagues as well. We saw Robert Stevenson jump his slider velocity up. It's been really good. Taj Bradley, a very similar situation, using that slider more, using that slider harder. It's a cutter, but whatever. To righties, and it's worked. It was bad last year. It's good this year. It's up a tick and a half. The Rays are the team that if you're trying to develop a slider, you go there, and I'm pretty sure you're going to get better. The Mariners are a team we hit on last year. I consider them the anti-fastball team. They have a lot of slider usage. Number one in the minors, next to a couple of teams we talk about. Not too surprising there. Fastball usage for them, you're not going to be surprised to see that it's incredibly low. Oh, what did I do here? Oh, we lost fastball. Where is it? There it is. No, where's it going? Come on. Come on. There it is. What is going on here? There it is. Oh, geez. Okay, sorry about that. All right. Usage for them, for the Mariners, super low. Lowest in baseball, right next to the Red Sox. We'll hit on it in a sec. But the Mariners' lowest four-seam usage, highest sinker usage, lowest release height. This is the only time I think we're going to hit on release height, but it's very applicable to what they do as an organization, the Mariners. And it's honestly what the Red Sox are trying to do, if we're being honest. Lowest release height in baseball. They like low slot guys. Those low slot guys are not going to be attuned to throwing four seams, so they throw sinkers. And then as you jump to the sliders for them, highest slider usage, lowest slider velo, and also highest slider sweep. So they have a particular type they like. It's ironic to me that at the major league level, they throw, I would say, a low amount of fastballs. I think it's more average, but I think of a lot of their starters as having good fastballs and throwing fastballs well. Kirby, Gilbert doesn't throw his fastball at all. Bryce Miller, Brian Wu, good fastball guy. Luis Castillo, multiple fastball guy, mixes things up. But it's fascinating to me that they're doing a really good job, I think, on the minor league level of developing. And maybe that philosophy changes slightly when they get to the majors, or maybe it's just a byproduct of the pipeline they've created. Anti-fastball team is the Mariners. Our interesting teams, these are the two teams that I want to keep an eye on, and I'll combine them together. The White Sox and the Marlins, fascinating orgs. For one reason in particular, as we go to our change log here and look at fastballs this time, I want to poke around on velocity and how it's increased for a couple organizations year over year. Lines 2 and 3 here, the White Sox and the Marlins, the two highest increases in fastball velocity year over year from 23 to 24. The only teams close to a mile per hour increase. That has been really impressive to see. I tweeted this out. James Fagan, who I believe works for Sox Machine, had a tweet where he asked Bannister about what I tweeted. Bannister had a really good response where he said he doesn't really chase velocity, more so chases body movements, getting guys to flow naturally, and that results in velocity overall. And we're seeing some of that. And Bannister's a guy that, I respect him a ton in the industry. He had a really good presentation at Wake Forest's Bridge Conference back in 2022, which I watched, and it's unbelievable. He's one of the more interesting minds, I think, in the sport from a pitching philosophy side of things. And I think he's making positive impact in the White Sox organization. I would argue that's the best hire they've made in probably multiple decades. I don't know. There's probably a better hire in there. I'm not trying to rip the White Sox. But they were very bad in terms of results last year. That was the worst FIP, worst ERA in baseball in the minor leagues. This year, they're more middle of the pack. So they're not going to a top 10 org. They're not all of a sudden a top 10 org. I just think they're middle of the pack. And that is very important, I think, for developing pitchers, developing fifth starters, bullpen guys, etc. And they've done that on the basis of a big jump in four-seam fastball velocity, which is important. They use a lot of curveballs in the minors. You know, their slider velocity is up as well. That might just be a general theme in terms of when fastball velocity jumps. It's going to help sliders too. The other team that's in a similar spot is the Marlins, who've jumped 0.86, which is, again, really high. Again, nice increase in results here. I would imagine that the correlation between fastball velocity increases and results is pretty strong. Increased fastball velocity, your results get better. That balance, we know. 2023, they were also very bad, but not as bad as the White Sox. This year, they're top 10-ish in terms of results. Peter Bendix comes into this organization from the Rays. Velocity jumps up. He was hired a bit late. I'm not entirely sure how much of an impact he had on changing larger philosophy in the minor leagues, but we have seen them hire, I wouldn't say unconventional people, but people outside the norm of who they generally hire. Those are my two teams I'm watching going forward, and I think fastball velocity is the indicator that suggests they're turning things around in a way that I would argue is positive. Maybe more towards the middle of the pack, but they're not bad anymore, which is really good. The Orioles are a team I want to hit on because last year when I talked about them, they were confusing to me. They didn't really have anything that stood out, and yet they had really strong results from a fielder independent pitching and ERA standpoint. This year, however, I do see a differentiator with them, and it's on the fastball. Strong K-minus walk. Looking at fastballs in particular, they're right around average velocity. But the thing I want to point out here, vertical movement and release height. The league has been so focused on low slot vert that I wonder whether the Orioles are trying to find an edge and going with guys who are perhaps a little bit higher slot who still have a lot of vert, or actually able to execute vert more effectively, have more vert because they have higher slots. I just wonder whether the league has been so trained on low vert, ride, vertical approach that the Orioles are perhaps thinking ahead and assuming that to some extent on the hitting side, hitters will catch up to that. So instead of going towards the low slot Red Sox, Mariners strategy, I would argue, let's go in the opposite direction. Let's throw the highest vert fastballs in the minors by almost a full inch, which is pretty substantial because none of the other jumps are anywhere around that. Let's sort that number out right there. And they also have the highest release height. Second highest release height. And the Phillies are number one. And the thing that I would argue with, I wasn't entirely sure whether this was just like an environment thing, but I do believe that the Phillies and the Orioles minor league teams cross over a ton. So this is a large difference between these two orgs despite having the same release height, which makes me think that either they're engineering their fastballs better or something along those lines. They're doing something different from other orgs, and I just want to point that out. I don't know if it's good. I just think they're maybe trying to stay ahead of the curve by doing this. Second highest release height, highest four-seam vert by a good amount. The Braves are fascinating because they have really good results. 0.4, I mean, that's crazy. Our minor league average is like around 4.6-ish, I believe, 4 or 5. They're almost a half a run below that in terms of results. They were also really good results last year, too. But the weird thing here is that they don't really throw fastballs hard, right? 92 miles per hour? Weird. They do use a ton of splitters. Maybe this is driven partially by a guy like Hurston Waldrop who threw a lot of splitter. I would argue not, though. He's not throwing 1,000 splitters before he got called up. You know, Phillies and them, two teams above 3%. I like that for the Phillies. I didn't hit on them too much in this, but I think that's a sign of thinking about interesting things. I would argue all these teams from a pitching development side are at least thinking about things in a modern way using splitters. I would argue that this team on the bottom, Anaheim, Angels, the Yankees too, interesting. I wonder if that's a classification thing, which we'll talk about in a second. 12 splitters the entire year for the Angels. What are we doing? That's my shrug down here. I'm jumping ahead, but that's just perplexing to me. We're on the splitter tab, so we got to talk about it. But back to the Braves, sorry. A lot of splitters. Good results. Bottom four fast. I don't really know what to do with the Braves because they're a team that doesn't come up often at all in terms of being one of the top 10 teams from a pitching development standpoint. Despite that, we have seen them churn out good arms. Spencer Strider, Schwellenbach looks good. I think Waldrop's a good pitcher. Smith-Shawver's hurt, but I liked the changes they made with him year over year. And yet, I've heard from people in that organization that they don't do the best job on the biomech side. They don't ask great questions around pitching development. They're pretty old school in a lot of their approach, but they're doing it in such a way that's working. So I struggle to critique them because of the results. I wonder whether this is a team that we're going to see these results right here jump off after a while, where it's just not going to be as good, and then we'll look back on this video and be like, oh, that was the reason why, right? We saw they didn't really throw hard. Maybe they stave it off with some splitter usage overall. I don't really know what to do with the Braves, I'll be totally honest. But again, we're pointing out interesting things. The Red Sox still hate fastballs. We saw this a little bit. Let's touch on it really quickly again. Fastball usage for them in the major leagues is tracking for the lowest, basically in the history of the sport. Pretty confident we could say that because it wasn't like a team was throwing no fastballs back in the day. So, yeah, we see that push down to the minor leagues, too. Sometimes what we see is separation between what's happening in the major leagues and what's happening in the minor leagues. For the Red Sox, we're not seeing that. At the major league level, they kill fastball usage. The minor leagues, they're also killing fastball usage overall. We can see that, again, by looking at the decrease year over year for fastballs, 2023, 2024. Here's our change. Let's look at the biggest change. Let's look at the biggest increase. No, we're looking at the biggest decrease is what I want to look at. So we're going to flip this. Boom. 9 percentage point drop. No, that's double. It's almost double the next team in terms of fastball usage drop. It's crazy to me. I love that the Dodgers are also dropping their usage because why not, right? They go from 42% down. That's interesting because I've always viewed them as a team that prioritizes fastballs and use fastballs. It might be something to monitor, which I didn't point out when I talked about them earlier. But the Red Sox hate fastballs. They're not throwing them. They bring Breslow and Andrew Bailey in. They're throwing other pitches. It's working. I'm fascinated to see how long. I wonder if they're late to the party, if that makes sense, right? They're doing really well at the major league level in terms of getting results. The Mariners have done this, though, for a couple years, and they haven't really been lauded in the same way, despite the fact that they have a really good major league staff right now. So we'll see. I wonder whether this reverts back and some of these teams dropping fastball usage, push fastball usage back up as hitters get a better understanding of other pitches. The Yankees, very quickly, I want to point out, are confusing to me because they have the lowest four-seam fastball velocity in the minors, which I did not expect, especially when you combine them around teams like Toronto and Anaheim, which I'm not entirely sure what they're doing on the pitching development side of things. This is a tough one. I wouldn't say it's weird. I point out the fastball velocity stuff because I do think it matters, and I do think throwing hard matters. I'm not entirely sure whether slow fastball velo is bad per se. And I'll say that because a team like the Guardians prioritizes high carry, low velo. We can develop the velo. The Giants just don't throw a lot of fastballs in the first place. I don't think they really care about that. Although I've heard some weird things about their pitching development as well. Not entirely sure. They've done a good job with Jordan Hicks and some others, so I won't rip them. Angels, I don't know what they're doing. They're throwing a ton of fastballs, too. The Guardians throw a ton, but in different ways, right? You could see similar stats with certain organizations, but know that they're getting to those in different ways. The Guardians are throwing 47% fastball, which is similar to the Angels. Also low velo. But I'm going to put a picture of the Guardians organization before I put them in the Angels organization. With the Yankees, I want to point out one thing quickly. Largest fastball velo decrease too. This data came on the left side from one organization, so they're classifying their pitches in their own way. I'm not entirely sure if that organization is missing the fact that the Yankees have a lot of cutters in their minor leagues that are thrown as primary fastballs. So I know that the Yankees are into these guys that are a bit crossfire righty, sweeper, cutter, sinker, Michael King, Hayden Wesneski, a lot of those types in their org. Will Warren's another one. They're not throwing fastballs hard. I wonder whether it's because of misclassification. Because I talked to someone in the Yankees organization, asked them, based on their data, where they had them as fastball in terms of fastball velocity. He had them more middle of the pack, maybe slightly below average, and I went perfect. Because that lines up with the misclassification thing and also gets to the point that maybe it's not an issue per se. Something to consider. I don't think it's bad again. It's just interesting to me. The last team I'll point out is the Angels. Largest increase in fastball usage. Their velo stagnant, and they decreased slider usage. So they're doing the opposite of what the Red Sox and the Mariners are doing. Opposite directions, right? Pulling up fastball, down slider. The other team that does this is the Pirates, which is interesting because they have some very interesting arms in the minor leagues. So I haven't talked to anyone in that org about this. I probably should have before this video because it would have been interesting to see what they thought. But increase, right? The decrease is Dodgers, Red Sox, etc. The increase, again, Yankees up there weird. Yankees are doing some weird things. I'm not entirely sure if I have an answer for you on that. Again, I really think that's cutters, but I guess we'll find out in due time. Increase, Pirates, Angels, two teams above 5%. They're perceived pretty differently because I think the Pirates are in a good spot, primarily because they have a lot of very good talent. Thomas Harrington, Solimento, Skeens up the majors, Jared Jones, Ashcraft. They have a couple other interesting arms here, yet they're increasing fastball usage on the minor league side. It gets back to the point that teams can have very similar statistics, but I think they're getting to them in different ways. I'm just going to say it. I don't trust the Angels in terms of what they're doing. I probably trust the Pirates more. So these are the teams that are doing things counter to a lot of what we talked about of throwing more slider, less fastball. Perhaps it'll work. Perhaps it won't. Perhaps we're wrong on both these teams. Perhaps I'm wrong on the Pirates and we look back and go, okay, that was the reason why. I'm not entirely confident the Angels are going to be able to figure it out unless they have some larger sweeping changes organizationally. Remains to be seen. I went through this quick. I hope it made some sense. Thank you for watching. If you have any comments, questions, etc., want to know about where your team places, throw them in the comments. I'll be there. I'm going to be on MLB Network to do some draft coverage, which is awesome, super cool. July 14th, Sunday. If you have MLB Network, watch. I'll be on there. Jim Callis will be on there. I'll be with Melanie Newman, Carlos Collazo. We're really cool people. Do some great work as well. I'm hyped for that. My MLB Network debut is coming for the Combine, which by the time you're watching this video, probably is already passed. But we're growing. We're growing together. Thanks for following the channel. Trying to push it to 10K. I know I just got to 5K, but the goals are ambitious here. Really appreciate following, engaging, etc. Fun video. If you made it to the end here, that is impressive. I don't think many people get to this point in videos of mine. So again, thanks for following me along. I'm always here for questions. My DMs are open pretty much anywhere I have social media, so hit me up. Thanks for watching. Take care.